So, I've done this a few times before. I love making pen and paper games. It's a great fun, great time, lots of creativity. And because I've done this before so many times, I've got a package already that I've started with. We're just going to take that and we're going to go over it and we're going to say, how can we make this so that it's actually viable and usable and not a complete piece of ass? Because that's probably the state it's in right now, considering I built it over a couple days. That was how long it took. I just sat down and went, I'm going to write some rules down. And then we're done. That was it.
Yeah.
I had some rules.
That's all you need.
Yep. Now we have to make them worthwhile. So we have to set some goals and expectations. We need to have a set point that we want to get to as a team. We can't just go willy-nilly making rules for no fucking reason, because then we don't really have anything that means anything.
Just got a pile of stuff.
Yeah. So these rules I've made are primarily based on D20. And I want to change that. Because I'm not a huge D20 fan. As simple as it is, I like the simplicity. I feel we can take that simplicity and apply it to a better dice roll system. The handful of D6 from Shadowrun. We just need a more uniform rule set, so we're not doing a different set of rules on every fucking roll in the game, like Shadowrun did.
Yeah, that would be good. The one thing, if you're doing Shadowrun style dice in person, specifically in person, is that you need a lot of D6 when you start getting high level. Like you end up rolling like 18, 20 of them. It's a lot.
If you have 5, you're fine. 5, 3, done. We've done it that way before. If you own a game of Yahtzee, you can get by.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard. And when you do have like 30, 40 D6 and you can just grab handfuls of them and be like, you feel so badass. It's almost like a feeling of character progression. You can see how much stronger you're getting just by holding
keep
your
adding
dice.
more dice to those rolls.
However, we can put a cap on it. We can do an upward limit still. That's something we can look at, because you know what? It is kind of onerous to try to roll 28 D6.
Yeah, takes a while.
Zug Zug had 28 body.
Which, I mean, the fact that you can then just kind of scoop up a big handful of dice and just throw it all down at once feels pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Especially because it's body, so it's like another player tries to hurt me and the GM looks at me and goes, roll for damage resistance, and I just like pick up all the dice on the table and drop them. Like, I win! It was a kind of fun feeling. So, I don't see too much chat going on. I know Board was here earlier. Board, have you ever played pen and paper games? Everyone else, have you played pen and paper games? What have you played? What's your background? What do you know? I'm sure you know that I've played like all of them. I talk about that once in a while. We literally used to just grab a different pen and paper system every week and play a game on it. And then be done with that after 2 days and spend the next 4 or 5 days making characters and planning out, and then spend a couple days playing it. And we just did this week to week to week to week to week to week to week, all through an entire grade of school. That's a lot of pen and paper systems. First time here for one of these, so you're just along for the ride. Awesome. Love to have you here, Kuro. Welcome. Welcome. Have you ever played any pen and paper, though? Is that ever anything you've done? Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, Pathfinder, Mech Warrior.
Oh boy, what a system.
A little bit of D&D. What version? I'm going to assume it's a D20 system. Gonna assume.
Well, I mean,
I don't think you're as old as me, so
AD&D.
I don't think you're as old as me. You probably don't. You probably didn't do 7 years of THACO. 5e? Oh, 2e? That is THACO!
Ooh, THACO.
I was a THACO GM for like 7 years or something. Pity me. You know how much player math I've done for them? Goddamn players, do your own goddamn math. Okay. What do we want to start with?
Which is why the system changed so much when they went to 3.5.
Yeah, honestly, 3.5, being able to just roll a d20 and like, hey, everything's decided. I was like, I like this. So here, I watched a DM online who runs a modified 2e system. Cool.
Interesting.
Cool. So you'll understand what we're doing and talking about at least. So one of the cool things I've implemented in the past that I'd like to talk about before we get started. Been in a few very brief 5e campaigns, so really haven't played much. That's cool. You've played enough to get the gist of it at least. And you probably now understand with what you've played that how good your game is 100% dependent on the GM that hosts it. Yeah. Okay, so what I was trying to say, the system that I worked out before, I built a Matrix pen and paper system when the Matrix came out back in the day. That's how much I liked that game, and we played it for like a year. We really liked that system. It worked really, really well. It was really cool. One of the things that I did, I used a modified D20 system where every roll was a combat, basically. So instead of making rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls for the turn, across the turn we would go by everyone and decide what everyone's doing. The fastest people would decide last, because I love that system. So the slower people declare their action. They're probably strong. They're going to be hard to overpower, but they're not fast. So they declare it, and then the fast people declare what they're going to try to do about the strong person doing his shit, basically. And we see where who collides what, and there's skills, and there's a quick and easy target number decided based on each person's skill, and then one die roll decides the round. That one. And that was to try to streamline combat. I really like the idea of streamlining combat, because then it's just a whole bunch of RP, a whole bunch of decisions, and then one die, and you see which side of the die you landed on, offensive or defensive. Did you make a roll or not?
That's interesting to me, because the part of the D&D and other pen and paper systems that I've played that I enjoy the most is the combat. So I think that there's a balance to be struck there, where it's a little bit of, giving player agency, feeling like you can really influence what you're doing, but also keeping it in a sort of streamlined format so that we can, have
get through a
that
fight.
don't take half an hour.
Yeah, because I'm with you. I love combat. Now, obviously, combat systems are my favorite, so yeah, I'm a combat guy. But, yeah, combat can just become so slow sometimes. I enjoy watching combat a lot, but playing yourself seemed to be more into the RP, which is a big surprise to you. Awesome. Look at that. Learning about ourselves by playing games. I love it. Love it.
Hello.
But yeah. Hey, Pseudo.
Oh, we have a pseudo.
Are you familiar with what we're doing yet? Have you?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
was tuning into the stream. I see the title.
Excellent. Did you grab that whip that I sent out?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm doing it now.
I'm getting it now. Eeyore.
As it turns out, Windows's audio code continues to be garbage.
Yeah, and then I had a really fun experience when I activated the new driver that my entire computer just went to a crawl.
No, yeah,
Even
that's
to the point where RGBs were lagging. I'm like, ooh,
wow. That's weird. However,
Yeah.
Pseudo, you sound fantastic.
It took a while, but we got there.
And hey, Val, what pen and paper experience do you have, Val? We need to know. Pseudo has actually touched on this system once, because after I finished originally making it, him and one of his friends from high school at the time played like a one-day campaign in it. Which is cool. So, let's go over goals. Things we want to achieve, because as a team, we can't just start throwing ideas around and stuff. We have to actually have a set place we're trying to get to. As one person, you can just sit down and go, I'm just going to make stuff up, and you can come up with something cohesive that works if you've done it, a little bit before and kind of know what you're doing. As a team, you need goals. You need to be working towards a uniform vision, and you both need to, all need to understand what that vision is. We actually called out Shadowrun as a really cool system, but so many rules. Yes. Yes, that is the number one problem with Shadowrun, is that every action you do in the game has a different rule set with a different target and different modifiers and different stats that they rely on, and you basically have a rule book for every single check you want to make.
Yeah. Really, really cool setting, really cool system. Just way too much of it. They needed to just stop with rule creation about halfway through.
They made a really cool computer game and want you to play it with dice. That's kind of where it's at. That's how I see it. Because when you translate it to a computer world, it's a fucking fantastic game. It plays great. It's pretty overwhelming. I just like the setting. 100%. Love the setting. I'm a huge Cyberpunk fan. Which is why we liked Cyberpunk. Because we love Cyberpunk. It was in the name.
Yeah, that game has probably more than its own share of problems. But overall, like there was a lot of good stuff in there. It just wasn't executed very well.
Yeah, they'll get there. I mean, everybody ranting and raving about Witcher 3 forgets that Witcher 3 was a buggy piece of ass when it came out. And lacking content. Wasn't until a couple major expansions that everyone started touting it as Game of the Year. I'm sure we'll get there. It'd probably take longer because they have a lot more shit to fix.
Yeah, a lot more technical problems, not just lack of content.
Okay, so goal number 1. And this is my reason for stating earlier that I'd like to move away from a single D20 and move towards the multiple D6. And that is percent failure reduction with higher skill counts. And that's the number one reason. No Man's Sky made a big turnaround since launch 2. Yes, it's not even the same game. Not even close. The new one actually has multiplayer code, and you can see other people in it. That alone is a pretty major fucking change. Because they said it would, but it didn't. Yeah, we won't get into that one, but we've said time and time and time again that we knew something was up the moment they said, largest world in the game ever existed. It's so big, you'll probably never see another person, but there is multiplayer. That's a red
And then
flag.
we went, there's no multiplayer, is there?
That was pretty much our reaction. Because why build a world so big you'll never see anybody and build multiplayer? That's a lot of money. There's no reason for it. Anyway. Percent failure reduction with higher skill counts. So the way D&D kind of gets around this is you've got a single... Hey, Spent, welcome. You've got a single D20 roll to determine your skill. You've got a target point that you've got to reach. Above it, you pass. Below it, you fail. The more points you spend, you get a plus to that die to help bump you over the thing to make it easier to pass. But if you roll a 1, you fail. So the most you can ever have is 95%. And you know what? As an expert computer builder, I fail less than 95% of them. There's less than a 5% chance that I'm going to fuck up your computer when I build it.
But it is still possible. So we do need to have sort of an asymptotal relationship with failure.
Yes. Which is what the D6 accomplishes. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how the D6 system works is if all of the dice that you roll are a 1, it's a critical failure. Guaranteed fail. Now, why does this work so well? If you have one skill in something, you're actually highly likely to fuck it up. You barely know what you're doing. You know just enough to be fucking dangerous. Does that sound real world? Sounds real world to me. I've definitely dealt with those people. Like the person who decided he would clean his computer. So I went over to visit him while he was in the process of it. As I walk into his house, he has all the pieces of his computer taken out and a vacuum power head sitting on his main board. People did this. People did this. I loved how they handled low intelligence characters in the Fallout games. Yeah, me too. But as you go up in D6, like after you get to 5 skill points, which is like a very, very high level of proficiency. I have a theoretical degree in physics. Yes, 100%. As you go up to higher dice totals, like say once you get up to 5 dice, now you need to roll all 5 ones in one roll to actually fail. And the odds of that are insignificant. It could happen. You can roll a Yahtzee of ones, but you're not going to see it very often. Like a 1 on skill checks, you expect to see one every game session.
At least one.
Yeah. But once you actually get good at what you're doing, you really shouldn't fail that much. We actually are better than 95% typically. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, Spen.
Yep, exactly. This is what I'm getting at. So this is why I've always been such a big fan of the Shadowrun D6 system. I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. We need to make that work. So I want to remove D20 and add in a D6 system. Oh, thank you. Multi-D6 system. Are we all on the same page so far? Does anybody disagree with that logic? Mainly Rage and Pseudo.
Nope.
I want to know that. I need those two to go like, yeah, you're not insane, because otherwise I just don't know.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong.
Okay,
but
that's good enough.
Insanity
That's
is
good
not
enough.
necessarily correlated here.
That's fine. Not being wrong is good enough.
The percent failure reduction, I feel, goes along with percent super success chance that we should account for somehow. Like, you not only are you less likely to fail, but you are more likely to do it perfectly.
Okay. Likely to fail accomplished. More likely to critically succeed or perfect? Perfect.
Perfect, critical success, one or the other.
Needed. So we need to maths it out so that, let's say, like, I think 5 dice is what Shadowrun uses as top skill, and I think I'm happy with that for now. We'll just start where they are, and we'll change it when we find a need to change it.
I don't see a need to go over 5, because if you've got 5, then you can say, like, if more than half of your dice are a 6, then you critically succeed, and then you need to roll at least 3 6s.
Should we be able... more than half of your dice are 6s, so if you have 1 die and you roll a 6, you critically succeed?
Yeah.
But then it's a 1 in 6 to just, like, perfect it, even if you've just started doing it.
Maybe you can only critically succeed if you have more than 1 die.
I'm thinking a critical success is 3 successes.
So you wouldn't be able to critically succeed until you have 3 ranks in a skill.
Correct. It represents a level of knowledge, a level of proficiency, and then the better you get, the easier it is to do it perfect. You're always going to make some little mistake if you've just started. Like, you know, forgetting to put the mount on the main board or something dumb, because I've never done that.
No, definitely never forgotten a standoff. Yeah, I think that little change in wording, because, like, I was thinking of the high end. I was thinking of when you have 4 dice, when you have 5 dice, you know, you need more than half of them, which essentially equates to 3.
Yeah.
And I think that change of wording is of, you know, you need at least 3 to critically succeed, makes it work really well, so that you're really rewarded for going in heavy on a skill.
Yes, I like that. Yep. And we can also be looking at modifiers later to skills. So like a +1, a +2 could just be +1 dice, +2 dice. Just that much better at it. Certain tools and stuff like that. Like if you're writing a piece of code in Notepad, because that's all you've got, that's your flat coding skill. But if you've got a really good IDE that checks everything for you, it might give you +2 to coding.
But wouldn't more dice mean less chance at success as well? Like at a critical success?
Nope, because you just need more than 3 successes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're rolling 6, you just need to have 3 that are the same.
Yeah,
Yes.
basically 3 6s. So now you've got almost only need half of the dice. If you go up to 7, you only need less than half of the dice to be a 6. And the more dice you get, the more likely you are to critically succeed.
Right.
I already like what we've come up with. Okay, we're done. That's it.
We fixed it.
Ship it. We'll fix the rest with patches.
Now we're really game developers.
What I'm thinking about then is, as well as there's just a lot of kind of variety and values that you can get then. If it's just the 6 that you have to get, there's a lot of in between, rolling all 2s and rolling all 5s.
Just the 6 is the critical, I did it perfect success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like, there's still a lot of things in between. Yes, like if you're rolling 6 die and you get all 2s versus you're rolling a 6 die and you get the 3 5s you need, like there's still quite a bit of, skill difference in those two things between a critical success and a critical failure. So like, what I'm worrying about is we want to get to a point where it doesn't just feel like they're rolling all these dice just to have these 3 numbers, and then there's still a huge possibility of other stuff coming up that doesn't actually even really matter at the end of things. So it's like
100%. I was thinking of this. This is only the crit success. This is just the 20 that we're resolving right now, basically. So basically, we're saying we don't want D20, and D20 has a roll. I rolled a 20. I crit success. I automatically get it. So we want that to be in there still. Now that we've figured out how we like that, as long as you're okay with the 3 or more success for the crit, now we have to look at how do we determine what their actual target is.
So for targeting, in order to give a greater sense of player agency, I feel like opposed rolls might be good, but that sort of goes against the streamlining idea, because it also gives you the, my skill at X is higher than your skill at X, so I have more numbers. Like if somebody's got 5 dice worth of strength and they're in a fist fight with somebody against, 2 dice worth of body or defense or whatever we end up calling it, that person will very likely be able to overpower the defender pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. So we have options here. Opposed rolls is one. Target number total. So you've got a value, you've got a roll, and we add up all the d6 that you roll together and see if you meet that number. It gives you a nice uniform change in the target. Every added die is an extra +1 to the low end that you could ever roll. Increases the top end that you can potentially roll by 6. Gives you a ever climbing target number that you can hit for as your skill goes up. That gives you those. You can get higher and higher and higher targets where, let's say you're not allowed to roll it if you couldn't succeed at that point. So if you just don't have the dice to try it, it's just a skill over your head.
I guess one thing to just keep in mind as we go with more and more dice is just the probability bands of the curve that it's going to draw.
Yep.
Like if you're rolling just 2 dice, like the number that you'll most frequently get is 7.
7. Yep.
From the combination between the two. And as we add more and more and more, that curve still stretches out more and more and more. I also want to make sure we don't fall into a pattern where, because most of the time it'll just be within that band, which I think is like going to be like 85 to 90% of the time you're within, between critical and not of those top little end percentages.
Yep.
That there's still something in there that, makes it enticing. 'Cause that's the one thing about the D20 system is that 15 and up is usually what you're going for, or 14 up is what you're going for, and there's a big difference between 17 and 18 for most encounters and stuff like that. And 20s are rare, but they're really big. But most people are still kind of rolling to hope to get to like a 17 or an 18. And just making sure we can still approach that with this kind of system and not getting somewhere where we have too much dice and a bit too much entropy, that we're just always kind of just getting 7, getting kind of, higher than, the bare minimum, but not really, in the higher averages.
Yeah, we have to keep in mind what our normalized target value will be. The reason that we were talking about going to D6 rather than the D20 is because the D20 is always 5% fail, 5% crit. It doesn't change. Whereas we can actually massage these values by adding more dice. So the more dice you have, the more likely you are to succeed, the more likely you are to critically succeed, and the more dice you have, the less likely you are to critically fail, is the goal that we're going for here.
Yeah, I was saying, like, if it's less likely to succeed, as long as it's like the critical succeed and the less likely to succeed, all I'm trying to say is, like, if they're too rare, it may just get a bit bland because they're, rarely going to happen. If you're at the point where you're at 6s, depending on how you want to do that, you're going to be in the probabilities of, 1 in 4,000 plus kind of stuff like that. And sure, you shouldn't fail a lot, but, maybe there should be some sort of stuff where there's a little bit of scare, not like you're just completely confident in everything it is, or maybe there's some things you can do to, make yourself a bit more confident, but it might get to the point where failing is so rare that when it happens, it's just so egregious and so frustrating that it's just, an anti-pattern in the game and a complete negative mechanic.
But it's not failure that we've taken out to be less and less and less. It's critical failure. And only critical failure is what we've addressed so far. We still have to look at targets. So the better and better and better you get, the less likely you are to just completely, like the better programmer you are, the less likely you are to just completely crash the whole system when you try to compile some code.
Yeah,
that's very, 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 very rarely going to happen. But if you're trying to do something hard, you can still fail, for sure.
Yeah, my point mostly is that if it's something that isn't really brought up a lot, my main thing is that if it just never really happens, when it does happen, it's just going to be such, an egregious thing. It can be so far out there as a failure. And I know it's supposed to be a critical failure, but depending on how, rare it is or how infrequent the chance of it popping up is, then, it can just be kind of completely out of left field. Whereas professionals, they're aware of the dangers, and the reason why they don't happen is because they're aware and then mitigate them. So the thing I was kind of thinking of, still have it be something that's frequent, but have a secondary action that kind of negates that fact. So they could still see, oh, if it wasn't for my skills, I would have failed here. Rather than it just kind of happens sometimes because that's how the dice roll. Maybe have it be something where at the start it's more frequent, but there's stuff that can kind of cancel it out as you gain more skills. Maybe as more dice, your dice can cancel out, a 1. So maybe a certain amount of 1s, count as a critical failure, but as more dice you get, a higher roll can cancel that out. And then so you kind of see that you still could have failed, but if it was my skill, my increased ability that prevents me from doing these critical failures, rather than not really having any sense of warning, and then all of a sudden you just critically fail, and depending on the timing, it could be really bad.
So I have a thought, because I think you've brought up a really good point of being able to mitigate failure. What if instead of just getting a bunch of dice to roll, you roll sequentially?
What does that do?
Say you have 5 die, or say, you're rank 1. You have 1 die. You roll a 1, you critically fail, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you have 2 die, you roll once, you get a 1. You roll again and succeed. That makes it a regular failure. Or a critical success would make it a success. And then just sort of keep adding dice to that as a way to mitigate the failure.
I think we need to take a quick look before we come back to this at how to identify target number.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about target number.
I think that will help a lot, because once we identify a basic success and a basic fail, we can go deeper into the critical success and critical fail and what they represent.
Sure.
So for what I was thinking is over half the sum of the number of like over half the sum of max dice roll is a success.
I don't mind the logic that you've got getting to that number. I don't like the math on the spot constantly.
Well, I mean, it's essentially, did you roll 3 or above?
On all the dice, yeah. Average 3 or above. But we also have, that's your for your basic target number, because I think we need a variable target number. Because not all tasks within a skill are created even. Because we've been using
like opposed rolls.
Because but you're not always opposing someone either.
You're opposing the system. The GM rolls against you.
Okay.
Gotta
So
be hardest boss.
So for those that are wondering what I'm talking about, as an example, the target, the difficulty to write "Hello World" is going to be a lot less than the difficulty to write, a front-end UI. They're very different things, and one of them is a lot more complicated and requires a lot more skill. So, I believe, so how Shadowrun basically does that would be a 1 to 5 difficulty, and then you need to crack that number to succeed. How old Shadowrun did it is you could actually go over 5 difficulty, even though it's a d6, and every time you roll a 6, you get to re-roll that 6 and overload it, so you can actually get multiple successes. Depends on the complexity of the UI, too. Even the simplest UI is more complex than Hello World. But yes, the complexity of the UI would determine if it's a 3 target or a 5 target. That's how I see it. Where Hello World is a 2 target. Just don't roll 1s.
I think I think I see where you're going now. You want a way to modulate the difficulty of a specific task.
Yes.
And ideally, I think at the discretion of the GM.
Yes. Yeah, GM is always going to be a discretionary factor in these decisions. If we can eliminate as much GM discretion as possible, but GM is literally what makes these games go around. They're not possible without.
So I'm thinking we adopt a skill check difficulty for I still honestly really like the idea of opposed rolls.
Yeah, I'm not against them.
But we adopt a skill check difficulty much like Shadowrun did, where you just assign a difficulty to it, and that's how many dice you roll.
I don't mind the opposed system, and I like the fact that there's extra entropy, extra chaos, and both parties get to play a part in it, which is kind of fun. My only concern is simple math. Simple. When you start doing adding and multiplication, that's just too much on the spot. Can we simplify it so that the numbers work?
I mean, we could add the pseudo. What's the word for the number that's always going to be rolled based on the number of dice?
I'm not too sure I follow.
Like the number that's most likely to come up, the tip of the bell curve.
Oh, I guess just either the tip of the bell curve, the base band, or I guess even just the
Base
mean.
band. That's what I was thinking of. We just take the base band based on the number of die and say beat that. That's less math. It's also less flexible, but it's less math.
So we basically just have the value of skill, right? That's it. We have one value coming off of each character, skill. We don't know what the max is. The min is 0. And it has to be resolved by rolling d6 against each other. So I've got skill 2. You've got skill 5 in hand-to-hand melee. and you're trying to punch me. Go.
So you would roll your defensive
Dice
roll,
or roll?
your defensive dice.
Okay. How many?
Well, it depends on how many we go for max rank, because I'm thinking rank 0 is 1. You're just bumbling your way through it, but you might succeed. But if you're rank 2, so that would give you 3 die that you would be rolling. If you critically succeed, you block it. That's all there is to it. It's blocked. If you critically fail, full damage goes through. If you brain thing.
That's why I like these situations. We got to go over scenarios.
Not directly related to success and failure, but like we should do opposed rolls and then take away one value from the other. And then say, if you still beat baseband or something, then you win.
What number so like we're affecting dice, so if you have 5 and I have 2, you roll 3 dice? 4 dice?
Could do that. That's less math. That's a good idea. So you would automatically succeed. Like if you succeeded on 2 of your dice and I have a total of 6, then I would only get to roll 4 dice to determine damage.
We don't even know if there's damage dice yet.
Well, what I'm thinking is you either succeed or you don't. And the numbers that you use to succeed determine success. Like, determine the outcome. So, like, if I rolled those 4 dice and critically succeeded on all of them.
Well, critically succeed the roll.
Well,
you don't
critically
succeed on the dice, but yeah. It means you have 3 6s of your 4 rolls.
Yeah, then that would be, like, max damage and ignore an armor value? Question mark?
Or auto success, you're guaranteed to hit full force unless the other person manages to roll a critical success on defense. But I don't really like the whole unless, because now we're getting into like a flow chart just to determine a simple attack.
Yeah. And I'm trying to reduce the number of die rolls that you have to do, because then you have to do less math.
Yeah. And less math, if anybody hasn't played a lot of pen and paper, the reason we want less math is because the less math there is in a turn, the more streamlined the turn goes. Meaning you don't get sucked out of the game. You can be in the game, you can be in character, you can be flowing through combat. One of the key principles of D&D that really throws off some of the games is it's said all the time of it. It's the only game where 1 month can take 1 minute and 30 seconds can take 2 hours.
But like the way that I'm thinking of it is, I want to have both of the players that are involved in the action have agency. I want them to feel like they can do something about it, rather than in the D20 system where, the person who's trying to hit me just rolls and they either meet my AC or they don't. Like, that's not interactive.
I agree. I like feeling like I'm part of the action, even if I'm defending. Part of that could come into how we do skills. We don't have to necessarily do it in dice rolls. We could have melee skills that if you're good at melee, you can use to modify dice rolls on demand. So you find out this person's going to do this. You say, I'm going to activate this action for this round. So there's lots of ways we can actually address agency.
But let's focus on 2 people who are just trying to punch each other for now, because we need to work out this base case.
Yep, nope, totally. I just wanted to point out that agency can come other ways, so we don't have to be super hard and fast on that. So are we looking at 2 people trying to punch each other, or 1 person trying to punch someone?
There's a fist fight. One person is throwing a punch.
Okay, because if it's two people trying to punch each other, a situation and scenario to account for is they both hit each other.
Yeah, yeah. One person's throwing a punch because we're not doing simultaneous action, as far as I know.
We don't know what we're doing yet. I like simultaneous action for what it's worth.
I just find it gets so complicated.
I'd say the complication goes up a lot.
It can get more complicated,
And then-
but hey, it's just a challenge to overcome.
Yeah, that's how we find ourselves in that, a second takes a month kind of
Yep.
scenarios where everyone's going at once and everyone's trying to resolve this one action that took 1 second because everyone's acting at once.
So, attacking player declares attack. Defending player and attacking player roll simultaneously, question mark? And we resolve
Oh.
based on
Oh.
number of successes on the defender die, eliminating attacking die.
You're kind of on the same page as me here. Attacker rolls dice. Defender rolls dice. Attacker adds successes. Defender adds successes. +1 attack success per defender crit fail. +1 to -1 attacker success per defender crit succeed, and so forth. I don't think that's super complicated. The rules look super complicated, but the math in your head is really, really, really easy. Every 6 that the defender rolls is a -1 to the success of the attacker, as well as counting as his success. Every crit fail is a +1 to theirs.
So, problem here. We need to have the defender roll first. If the defender is the determinant of success, they need to roll first.
I see them both rolling at the same time.
Then we need to change the wording here to say they roll simultaneously. But the problem that you're going to run into is how do we choose which dice get nullified? Which is why I say nullify first and then roll the remainder.
Okay, hold on. I'm getting there. I see it happening at the same time. All right, let's go with a walkthrough of the actual process.
So I'm going to punch you. I declare my punch. I roll my 6 dice.
Yep. At the same
And
time,
then
I roll my dice. So let's say I roll
Your
3 dice.
3 dice.
Okay, so
I roll 2 6s, 2 5s, and 2 4s.
okay, let's
You
say
roll
let's say your
2 6s and 2 2s.
let's say your target is 5 for whatever reason, because I want some to be successes and some to be fails here. Okay, so you get four successes, right?
I get 2 crit successes, 2 successes,
Yep.
and 2 fails.
Yeah, but that's 4 successes, 2 of them crit in my system, basically.
Sure.
So you
however
get,
we want
Yep.
to determine that.
So you get your 4 successes. I have my 2 successes and 2 fails, but no crit fails. Because you have 2 crits, mine becomes 0. I have 2 crits, yours becomes 2.
I don't like that.
Okay.
It's too much arguing in the moment. This needs to be even more streamlined, I think, which is why if we just change it that defender goes first, then we can really streamline it and just say, okay, well, defender got 2 crit successes. That means you only get to roll 4 dice instead of 6.
What if they don't get any crit successes or crit fails,
Then you
it
just roll your normal
resolves
attack.
normally.
which will be the most common thing?
Yes.
I think we just need to take a step back and maybe think about like what exactly we want to have happen on a critical success and a critical failure, and overall what it means for the system.
Hey, Sergeant Pook,
Like-
welcome. I was actually thinking the same thing, Pseudo, because I was just having a kind of thought, what if the crit success does something different? Like a crit success defender in Shadowrun, a crit success lowers your damage by 1, basically. It soaks an extra damage. So I'm not saying we go that way, but there are other effects and other places we can look and think to use these crits.
I just mean like even on like a more abstract level of like, you know, when you're rolling one dice, let's say, and 1's a critical fail and 6 is a critical success, you know, you can count it as a dumb luck. You know, you're basically just getting, you know, you failed because you don't know what you're doing, or you get successful because you don't know what you're doing, and it's just dumb luck. But as someone gets more and more mastery, you know, they should be able to be better and better without having to just be trying to get that critical success. That should just be kind of their baseline almost. You know, a master of something should just be at that level. And then, sorry, I got distracted. Door open. I can master that level, but like if it still happens, like, what would that look like for a master? Like what's a critical success look like for someone who's a master of their craft? Should it be anything super exorbitant, or should that just be kind of something that's frequent? Or if that's just, you know, some sort of, you know, what's the most abstract way to explain it? Is it still dumb luck? Can they get even dumb luckier and get something even, you know, crazier to happen? Or is that just something that should be frequent? I think it's something we need to figure out is how often do we want that to be? Is this the target that you're always trying to get? Or if we're just kind of paying too much attention to, you know, these criticals, which in reality in a D6 system, once you add multiple dice, are going to be pretty rare.
So I think that we should ignore luck for the skill check part. Though I think adding a luck entropy somewhere into the game so that you can have a lucky character is definitely something I'm into. Because I love luck. And I love it as a thing. And it's hilarious. And if we can work it in a great system.
I think luck should be a feat that gives you the ability to critically succeed on any roll. So you don't have to have rank 2 in that skill.
So, Sergeant Punk, my honest plan is once we get a beta system figured out over a few sessions, I'm going to make a mini campaign. And we're going to do it on the panel. Play it. Yeah. So, if you really want to try a pen and paper and you never have, I'm happy to punish you. But be warned, I play a pretty hardcore campaign, and I will just fuck you at the beginning until you figure out my system. Pseudo knows. So Rage knows.
The wording, yeah, luckily I already knew what I was doing. The wording on 1D, I think, is slightly incorrect. Must have 3 or more crit successes, or 3 or more 6s.
Yes.
So the more ranks you have in something, the more opportunities you have to roll a 6. It makes you more likely to critically succeed. And I think that's, like, in my mind, that's a good way to represent mastery, like your ranks in your skill increasing, you becoming a master of that thing.
Yeah, really, if you look at the graph of it, for the success, like a crit success isn't even possible until you've reached moderate level skill. And the only thing getting less and less and less likely is a crit fail, which is what we wanted.
We could add a layer of like super critical success. And if you roll all 6s, then something crazy happens at GM's discretion. Because that's just hilarious. Like, punch somebody's head off and it flies into the sun.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, like, what happens when, you know, if we still wanted that, like, because that was a nice thing about the D20 system is that even though you're rolling a bunch of dice eventually, or you have a bunch of plus modifiers, that doesn't really matter what you roll besides the criticals, it was still nice to have that kind of, you know, like the fresh change in environment of when you got that thing that's, you know, rare but not too rare, you know, might happen, you know, in a session, a couple times a session. Advantage made that a lot more common, which was kind of a sneaky way they did that to make it, you know, a lot of people like the kind of system is, you know, a lot more frequently to critically succeed than to critically fail, especially if you have that advantage, because you can kind of cancel that out. You take the highest number. The chances of you getting a 1 and then a 20 is very, very slim, but it's kind of crazy when that happens.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we could totally steal the advantage system.
Yeah.
Like we could just do that.
I actually personally think the advantage system is the greatest system that's ever happened, but advantage system works so smoothly because it's 1d20 and 1d20. Once we get into large levels of d6, it's already a chore to roll them and track them, and to do it again isn't necessarily the greatest thing.
Our max right now is 6 in my head. That is your maximum number of dice.
So at that point, you have to roll half of your dice as 6s to critically succeed, which is a pretty damn good chance, but not super good. And fairly, if you're a master of your craft, it's very unlikely that you're going to critically fail. Okay, let's say the critical success and critical fail is not all your dice, because there are other things that could modify dice moving forward. These are just base dice value. It's rolling a number of 1s equal to your skill.
Yes. Yes, I like that, because that way you can just add on modifier dice, and it doesn't necessarily, like, a dumbass with a power tool doesn't necessarily make a better carving than a master with a chisel.
Yeah. Yeah. This is our current agreeance.
Pseudo, you're looking very thinky. What are you thinking?
I'm just thinking. No, I'm just trying to play it in my head, because it's one of those things where it's hard to, like, just humans in general are not very great at visualizing probability.
Yep.
We're very good at thinking we understand it, and then we go to actually use it, and then it's one of those things where, there's a lot of entropy in dice rolls.
Yes.
It's one of those things where you kind of have to be careful, and you kind of do need to sneak some stuff in there, because then you have, depending on what you're going for, because when you get like XCOM with that 95% hit, and the people are like, I still missed, and it's that, well, it's still a 1 in 20, and a 1 in 20 isn't too frequent, but when you start getting to dice like this, when you're trying to get 3 of a kind on a 5 dice roll, it's still not that common, because we're not just doing 3 of a kind, we're doing 3 of the specific set of 6, which is a subset of getting 3 of a kind. So the probability for that is actually, it gets really, really low. It's not just 1 out of 6, 1 out of 6, 1 out of 6. It can start getting kind of complicated depending on how we want to handle that.
It's 1 out of 6 to the power of number of dice.
Yeah, and
it gets.
So one way I see adopting an advantage system to this would be, instead of redoing your roll, would be re-rolling a number of dice.
That's correct. The main thing I just wanted to say is that your probability of getting 2 6s is the same probability of getting a 1 and a 6. And I'm not sure if we wanted to do anything about that, but that's just how that is.
We don't know that yet, Punk. Before we made any decisions on that level, we are coming to the agreeances on our min value, our max value, and the definition of a critical failure and success. That's the level we're at right now.
If we want critical successes to be not very common, but more common, do we maybe adjust them to be greater than 3 successes and call the overall roll a critical success?
Yes.
Because that still leaves us with, until you have at least 2 ranks of skill in the thing, you're not going to critically succeed. But it makes critical successes much more much more accessible. Like you'll actually see them rather than needing to roll, 3 6s in order to get it on a rank 2 skill.
So is a crit success exactly what the character had envisioned for their outcome, or is it better in some way?
I view a critical success as you super succeeded. Like you did the shit out of the thing that you wanted to do.
Because what you could do is 3 successes is an auto success. So if you
don't like that.
No? And then you could have the crit success be the all 6s or all or many or more 6s.
So I'm still in my head working on the opposed roles idea.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I'm thinking about it is dice that are successful are applied to the thing. So like if you're hitting something, your successful dice are your damage value, which also brings up your minimum damage to 3.
And no, it doesn't get harder and harder. It's actually hardest to crit succeed when you have only 3 dice. It's impossible before that, and then every level over that it gets easier because you need 3 successes and you're getting more and more dice.
So if we do a critical success on 3 or more successes, then the end result of that is that we need some way to express the critical success.
Yeah.
Because you can still have, a bunch of dice that failed or a bunch of successes that you have to roll against.
Think of it like it's easier to hit your target with a... That's just represented by your target. We'll get to that. This is more about...
Like, to use your analogy, Punk, this is more like it's easier to hit your target if you've trained with that weapon rather than the first time you picked it up.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about right now. Experience with something increases your skill with it. How skilled are you with that flintlock? If you've used it a lot, like you're a master with it, then you're going to get 6 dice every time you fire it to try to hit your target. But if it's the first time you've ever picked it up in a gunfight and you're, just in a panic and you absolutely need a weapon, you're going to get 1 dice. Because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So you're never going to be able to crit because you've only got 1 die. You can't roll 3. And if you roll a 1, it's a critical fail. You've done something really dumb. Attack
Yes.
or attempt, yeah.
Anytime, like, the way that we're looking at it right now is everything is a skill. You don't just, attack things. You have a skill in, say, firearms. And the more skilled you are with small arms, the better you are at using them. But if somebody said, like, here's this rocket launcher, go use that, you're probably not going to be super good at it if you're only trained on using pistols.
Yeah, even somebody handing you an assault rifle and asking you to, reload it and service it in a normal situation, if you've only ever used a pistol, it's gonna take you a while, and you're probably gonna put it back together wrong unless you've done a lot of work with guns in general and know the process. Attack with is the important thing. Correct. Attack with
skill. Yeah. So it could be a melee attack. It could be a melee weapon attack. It could be a firearm. It could be magic. It could be any number of things.
Yeah. Like me trying to punch somebody where I've been trained how to punch somebody for X number of years by some people who really knew what they were doing versus somebody who's never had any training or never been in a fight. I'd probably be better at punching than that person. There's a lot of technique to it. A lot goes into it. I think you're on the same page now. Yeah. That might make highly skilled people overpowered. Highly skilled people are overpowered.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
These ranks in your skills are not going to be easy to get.
Well, you see, you're saying 15 dice is very likely to get 3 successes, but look, the skill max value is 6. That means, like, you are a grandmaster at what you do. Skill level 6. That's 7 dice.
And those may be modified by feats or equipment.
Yeah.
But
so you can
your
get take
skill
8 or 9
caps
dice,
out at
maybe.
6. This is similar to the proficiency system, yeah.
This would replace the proficiency system.
Little closer to
the skill system,
how
actually.
Shadowrun does it.
This would replace the skill system from 2E, is what this is. You know how you get skill points on your class, and you get to choose, like, climbing and alchemy and metalwork and all those kind of things? That's what we're doing. You can think of, like, a swordsmith as an example. A swordsmith works really well. A novice swordsmith is going to fuck something up in the process fairly often. It's a complex thing. Mistemper the metal, not bend it enough, not fold it enough, quench it too early. He screwed up something. He rolled a 1 on his 1 die. But he's done it more and more. He's trained and trained and trained. He's up to 2 dice. He's up to 3 dice. He's up to 4 dice. It represents his improvement in skill. You can see you're failing less and less and less. You're starting to make masterful items once in a while that come out exactly how you wanted them. You've practiced. You're getting better. Your skill is improving.
How are we going to determine how much to roll for what scenario, or how much against they have to beat? I'm a little unclear on, like...
We don't know yet.
That's what we were working on.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be kind of important to help, visualize the overall system of, what we're aiming for.
So let's talk about that at the same time. We'll put a question mark next to this because we're not agreed on the crit success yet. But let's talk about how we determine what the target of the roll is.
So I still really like opposed rolls for
fully skilled
player versus player stuff.
Fully skilled player will have around 15% chance of crit success with 7 rolls.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That is actually pretty fantastic, I think. That's about the best crit chance you can get in 5e. Because you can get a 17 to 20.
Is crit failure only when all your dice are 1? Or is there a threshold for that?
Number of ones rolled equal to your skill level is a crit failure.
Yeah, we really liked that one. Because there will be modifiers that let you roll more dice on top of things. Feats and situational benefits, tools and stuff like that you're using. But you still, the number of ones you need grows.
So like if you were a skill 7, or that is, and you roll 7 dice, your crit fail would be...
A skill 6 is 7 dice. Sorry. Skill 0 is 1 die.
So then you would need to have 6 ones to crit fail?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very rarely infrequent. Happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's we're talking a grandmaster of their craft, right? And that's like one of the best of the best.
Yeah. What I'm thinking of is that, like, at certain levels, do crit fails happen? Like, is it just an act of fate? Like, what's the, kind of explanation to what happens? Like, is it, they go to attack and the crit fail is they just stumble and land on their face?
Possibly,
Or
but that's
we-
zero skill in punching. You roll your 2 or 3 dice due to modifiers, and one of them comes up as a 1. Yeah, you've never done this before. You've got absolutely no training at all. I think you should fall on your face if you fuck
Yeah,
up.
but what I'm saying is that if you're a grandmaster, the best in the world, you can still just fall on your face.
There's a chance.
If we wanted to have that happen, if that's just something we want, or if we want to just have
Yes.
a certain level where you can fail, but you can negate a critical fail. We won't just completely blow something up once you hit a certain level. If you want to have that godlike status, which I'm fine with. My only concern is that like it can be really, if it's something that's like it's that rare, it'll only really happen to someone, probably like 1 or 2 people ever.
Yeah.
And like kind of if it's that rare, do we want it to be like something big about it? Do we really want to have that happen? Or like, it'd be kind of, it'd be a strange mechanic, because then we're kind of approaching that territory of where we're saying with No Man's Sky, where we have a mechanic, but it's just so rare that maybe only 1 or 2 people will ever happen, which basically means that it's just almost just not a mechanic. And should we just remove it at that point?
So
I mean,
to make a counterpoint, sorry, Des, to make a counterpoint, it's not that critical success or critical failure stops happening. Like it's still possible that you're having an off day, you fuck something up. Like it happens all the time. I think I'm pretty good at programming JavaScript. I still fuck up. It still happens.
Yeah. I think what I was meaning was just how, like, what's the threshold of how big the fuck up is just kind of what we need to outline versus how big the success is, because we still haven't defined that. Like,
yeah, I know we haven't defined what. I think crit fail is just an auto fail.
Yeah, like there's a
Complete
stumble.
fail, you didn't do any of what you intended to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing like you fall on your sword or that's what I'm trying to say is if it's something that's.
Well, we're not talking combat specifically. We're just talking general.
Okay, you delete your VM, you delete your computer. Like, what I'm trying to say is like how, if it's a super rare event, how do we want it to be something that correlates with that super rareness, or do we want to just have it be something like, oh, you hiccuped a little bit or you stumbled and you move on. It's rare, but it's not really a big deal.
I want you to think on that for 1 sec while I quickly address what is the point of balancing around something that never happens, because Pseudo also kind of had that argument. But just because your skill is 6, so you roll 7 dice as a default, doesn't mean you will only ever roll 7 dice. There's other modifiers to take into account. If you're using tools that make your job easier, that'll probably be recognized as more dice. Situations that are ideal, or people helping you, stuff like this, you can get more dice. That's why it's based on your skill value, so that as you add more dice, there's still a chance of fail, but it goes way, 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 way down. Would difficulty of task affect crit fail / success? No.
No.
This is to
the
represent
edge cases are either you 100% did it or you 100% whiffed it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is to represent the brain fart moments where, like, it's totally possible that I was just absent-minded while building a computer and plugged the powers into the wrong spots for some of them that look similar, or forgot to put a cable in, or forgot to add pieces, or forgot to ground
forgot
something.
to run power to your SATA SSD.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to turn on. Or you forgot to plug in the 8-pin EPS. But a minor note, skill min value is 0 ranks, which equates to 1 dice. Skill max value is 5 ranks, which equates to 6 dice. Just to make that very clear.
Okay. That's what you wanted.
And those ranks will not be easy to get.
No.
But I think for crit fail, it's just you completely whiffed on whatever you were trying to do. Like you just completely screwed it up. Didn't work. For crit success, I think it's you did the hell out of the thing. And for stuff like combat, that's represented as more damage, maybe. For stuff like skill checks, that's represented as you just did it. Whatever the system is putting up against you, you just surpassed it. So even if you were rank 2 in, say, hacking, and you had to crack a rank 5 firewall, like normally that would be extremely, extremely difficult to do. You would have to succeed on all of your dice to just have a chance of beating that opposed roll or that target number. If you critically succeed, you just do it.
Before the opposed roll?
Yeah.
So the
whatever the opposed roll is nullified, and you just do it.
Well, we could just do the initial, the offensive check first then. The initiating check first, and if it critically succeeds, it's done, and if it doesn't critically succeed, then you roll the opposed roll.
I think what I was kind of getting at is, was there going to be a difference between getting if you're rolling 6 dice, if there's a difference between, rolling 5 1s and 1 2, or rolling 6 1s? Like, what is, in a theoretical sense, like, do we want that to be a significant difference?
Yes, I think so. I think 5 1s and a 2, you just didn't do the thing. Like oh, so
see, this is what he's getting at, yeah.
Maybe we don't have like
Yeah. Degree of failure needs to be defined. Yeah, that's what Pseudo's been getting at.
So my brain had like half of an idea where we sort of just use what we've got for crit fail and crit success as our failure and success conditions, and everything in the middle determines like damage or degree.
That sounds complicated. Okay, let's do this. Let's all of this is on hold. How do we determine success target? It has
like
to success
sort of like the thing to win, like what you need to do.
What you need to do in order to succeed. It needs to include the difficulty of the task. Needs to include your skill level, which is done. Number of dice. Does it need to include anything else? How good you are at the skill and the difficulty of the skill?
Needs to also include potentially the opposing player's skill level.
I think there's
I think the difficulty of the task would change based on the skill of the opposing person. Punching a punching bag is much harder than punching Bruce Lee.
Much easier, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I think it depends on how if we want to have like an actor awareness in the system, whereas people have kind of control over their fate in a sense. If you're punching a punching bag, it's an inanimate object, it's just there. If you're punching a person, they have autonomy to move out of the way or to do something. And the thing I was kind of working my way forward for in regards to this kind of crit success and crit failure thing is, what happens in scenarios where two people crit at the same time to each other, or scenarios where someone crits and someone crit fails, or how does that affect things if someone's doing something to you? If we're trying to determine the order of things and someone's attacking you and they roll a crit, are you just completely screwed? Can you crit to negate that? Can you try something else, or like kind of how does that work, or that kind of idea? Is there a possibility of success, and there's certain tasks that will have a possibility of success and certain ones that are impossible? Do we still want people to try? And is it just going to be like, let's say if there's a 20-foot wall and someone wants to try to jump up it and that's just not possible with their current legs, do we let them try and just fail and nothing happens, or do we just say no, that's not possible, and move on? And if that's the case, what kind of skill would determine, what a crit fail would look like? Does a crit fail that just doesn't happen? Or, I think there's just a lot of factors that are going to kind of happen when we start introducing, quite a bit of, depending on if we want to introduce the idea of crits, we have to be kind of aware of, the probability of them, and kind of, if we're going to leverage it as a mechanic, making sure that it's, got the attention as a mechanic, rather than this rare thing happens and then it's like, oh well, what does this do? And then rulebook says, oh, nothing, it's, you fail.
So there's a certain degree of GM discretion that's going to happen whenever we're talking about either of the extremes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like your example of jumping up a wall, if somebody with not enough skill crit succeeds, fucking somehow they did it. Like, holy shit, how did they manage that? If they critically fail, I would say that that's sort of up to GM discretion to decide the punishment for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of not necessarily defining exactly what happens, but where the threshold is for a bigger failure. Because I've seen every GM I've known treats it a little different. They all have their own styles. So pen and paper isn't quite as hard and fast as a computer game. It's a strong guideline.
We could give some guidance for what a critical fail could look like some guidance on crit fail tables, for instance, that you then have to roll against. A 1 through 6, that's like, you roll a 1 again, like you take damage or you lose the item. And if you roll a 6 on the crit fail table, then it's just, you failed.
You tripped and stumbled and you have to spend a turn picking yourself up.
Yeah, because I think it might make sense to kind of scale that off their skill or their mastery. Like, if you're the best in the world, a critical failure, I think, is just basically missing. Versus if you're just starting out, a critical failure is, you're basically hurting yourself. It's those degrees of failure, right? It's the same thing as like if you have a professional driver who drives every day, a critical failure for a new driver is basically going to be pretty disastrous. Where a critical failure for a professional driver is still bad, but wouldn't be as bad as if, they didn't know what they were doing. It's kind of my point is they can still fail, but I guess it's just a guideline. I like what Rach said in regards to, have it maybe. I don't know if it has to be as formal as a table, but like the guidance to the GM being like, hey, if they're high level, they fail. It's to your discretion. Just keep in mind that the best person in the world, the best chess player in the world, when moving their pieces, is very unlikely to stumble and knock over the opponent's pieces, causing like a forfeit. Like, their fail.
I don't think that would even be part of the skill check. And to a quick aside, because I like the driver analogy, when a professional driver makes a critical mistake, he can still die.
It's much less likely, but it can
much less likely, but it does happen.
Yeah, I'm just saying if that's what we want to do, then we have to make sure to make that clear in the guidelines. Is all I'm trying to say. Is that like it's going to be very, very, very rare, but the results should still be drastic, or very, very, very rare, and their failure isn't as big as someone else's. The kind of two main folds I see with a lot of kind of DMs when it comes to that one roll is, how bad is it? Is it just you drop your sword, you pick it up, or is you swing wildly and you slash your buddy beside you in the face because you just don't know what the hell you're doing? Kind of idea. Like, how drastic do we want? Do we want to just have everyone be able to be that low as a failure and really critically fail, or do we want to have some sort of like baseline of you have a certain level of skill, you're not going to be past this and cause this much of an error. You're not going to vacuum your computer after a certain level of knowledge. You're not going to wash it under the sink after a certain level of knowledge.
You're not going to, and that would be up to GM interpretation of the critical fail, but you might be absent-minded enough in the moment to not ground yourself and touch something and have a big shock and nuke a part. Or format the wrong hard drive. Because I've never done that.
So, building off the idea of skill level at something, reducing severity of failure, perhaps we write up a guideline table saying, like, if somebody's rank 0 at something, like, for instance, firing a firearm, if they crit fail, they shoot themselves in the foot. But if somebody is rank 5 at shooting a firearm, a crit fail is, the gun malfunctions.
I kind of like the idea of just saying a failure plus additional at GM discretion.
Yeah, I mean, we could add some examples of like, if the DM wanted to roll for how bad the failure is, you have a 1 in 6 chance of it being a super, super crit fail, or if there's more dice, they can, use a bit more discretion and be like, okay, well, I'll give them a chance, but the chances are, okay, they crit failed, but now they get a chance to see how bad of a crit fail. But then we're getting to kind of layers, and then it just gets complicated. But all I wanted to sort out was, how, like, depending on how rare the crit fails are, do we want to, like, if it's at a point where there's a baseline where it doesn't matter too much, we have to be careful of, negating the mechanic at all after the early game. And if it's still there, it's severe enough, we have to make sure that, it's still going to be somewhat of a threat that shows up in a way as it can still be rare, but we need to have the system designed in a way where they're still aware of that failure at any possibility and not get to a point where they play this game for 2 years and then it happens one time and it results in their character death and they're just like, well, what the hell? Like it can be realistic, but that's not always the point of a game and a system.
It's going to be more common when you're doing things that you're not top skill in, and because skill points are not cheap and easy to get, you're going to be doing things that you're not necessarily a master in a lot of the time. Most of the things you do will not be the one skill that you're a master in. So I do see crit fails happening, and if we playtest and we never see them, then we can definitely address. But there's so much situational variance, and every GM has house rules. They all mold the system. Like I said, making a pen and paper isn't about making hard and fast rules. It's about making the structure for them to fill. I think saying failure plus an additional effect at GM discretion kind of nails it, because that's everything we've been saying. You don't just fail and this, or succeed and this. But we do have to look at how to get the target. Which is an important part. How hard is the task?
If we're including opposed roles in the difficulty of the task bullet point there, then I think we've got everything we need to determine our target.
I think opposed roles make sense against targets with agency. And I'm wondering what we want to do for something like jumping over like a gap, unless we want to roll for gravity. I've
got some ideas on that, but let's look at how it's going to work with the opposed roll, because that's what my idea hinges on. And then I'll propose something.
Sure.
So at that point, we know what the other person's skill level is. They roll, and the number of successes is... I kind of want to steal Shadowrun's crit, or not crit, but die overload for the opposed roll crit, where you get a success and reroll the die.
Yeah, maybe, but let's focus on target.
Yeah, well, okay, well, see, here's the thing now. If
just hold on.
Okay,
hold
what
on.
do you got? What do you
hold
got?
Hold on.
Because I have an idea here, but what do you got?
So, if we're including opposed roles in the difficulty of the task bullet point there, then I think we've got everything we need to determine our target.
Okay, what do you got? What do you got?
Number of successes determines the amount of mitigation you have
Okay, but what's the target
as the
for
defender.
what's the target for success?
The amount of mitigation. You need...
But what's the target?
Hold
they
on,
have
hold
to
on.
roll?
Okay, so I said that wrong. As the defender, the number of successes you have equals the values on those dice is the amount of mitigation you have. As the attacker, you need to get more successes than the defender in order to get through that, because your absolute number on those success dice is not big enough to break through the mitigation. And if you do get more successes than the defender, then if the delta between your attacking number and their mitigation number is the damage or effect that goes through.
I think it's too early to talk about the damage or effect. Maybe the modifier to the damage or effect, because there's a lot more that's going to go into that, but we still don't know what the target is.
Sure we do.
What's the target?
It's the number of successes that the defender has.
Okay, but what's the success target?
The six greater than three. Three or greater.
So everything is a success target of 3?
Everything is on an individual die.
Yeah.
The success target is 3.
On everything, always.
On everything. Keeps things simple. But on an opposed roll, the number of successes for the defender determines how difficult it is for the aggressor to succeed.
Okay, so we're doing away with the moving goalpost on the die, like the D20 system.
Yeah, I think that hurts more than it helps if you're using multiple die.
Yeah, we already have a different variable, so we're just moving the variable. So greater than 3, not 3 or greater. 4, 5, or 6.
3. Yes. Yes. My brain switched into programmer mode, and I was like, no, it totally starts at 0.
Yeah, dice don't have a 0 roll. And see, this just a quick point to when Kuro was saying the GM chess player wouldn't make a mistake, maybe a squirrel runs by and knocks a piece off the board. That's an example of every GM having their own style of crit fail, because my version of a crit fail for a chess player would be he makes a really dumb move and the other guy checkmates him in one move.
Or I would probably do it that he, knocks over the table, causing the game to be moot, and he forfeits.
Yeah, it's all about GM flavor at that point. You can't take that out of pen and paper. That is core to the game. You can have a 0 if you count the dice rolling off the table before it lands on a number.
What if it stays on an edge?
1 million! I argued it for long enough that the GM gave it to me. I have rolled a die on its point.
That's wild.
And the die roll was for resisting a nuclear blast. The GM laughed at me because I insisted on rolling for it, handed me my 28 body dice and said, roll for mitigation. And I rolled one on its point. I was like, that's 1,000,000 to 1.
Yeah. Found the lead-lined refrigerator 100%. Turns out it was inside Zug Zug all along.
It was amazing. But yeah. So just a target of 3, or greater than 3. Just roll better than half the die.
And that counts as a success.
So 4, 5, 6, or 5, 6?
4, 5, 6.
That gives you a 50% chance to complete the task at 1 0 skill level when you try to do it. If you have 1 die. Interestingly, when you're at... Oh, yeah, you get 2 dice at 1. Yeah, never mind. It's +1. Don't mind me. My brain just went, you'd have 1 die at both levels.
I mean, we can shift that and have everybody start at rank 1 of everything, but I think that implies the wrong thing. It implies that they have some skill there.
I completely agree. Completely agree. Pseudo? 4, 5, 6, or 5, 6?
I think 4, 5, 6. I think it just keeps it simple.
Okay. I'm good with this. So you just need to have one success to succeed?
One success to succeed, and the degree of success is determined by how skilled you are. So, like, if you're very skilled at punching things, and you punch thing, and you succeed with 3 of your dice,
It should be determined by the number of successes, not your skill. Your skill will be more likely to give you more
the number of
successes.
is determined by your skill.
And how well you rolled,
Yes.
not just your
But
skill.
if you're rank 0, you can deal at most 3 damage with a punch. If you're rank
we'll get to
5,
the damage and stuff like that. But you can
your success degree is maximum of 3.
yeah. Pending other modifiers.
If you're rank 5, your degree of success is max 24.
Okay. Do we want different?
No, max 18.
Okay. I'm gonna propose before we go back that we only have one type of roll, and if we're gonna do an opposed roll, make everything opposed roll, and then how difficult the thing is to do would be the determination of what skill level it rolls at against you.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was first proposing opposed rolls.
Okay. Then then when you have the autonomous object, there's still agency given to the GM to represent some variation in how difficult that skill is. There's still some combat back and forth, even on a basic roll. It's one quick roll from each of you. And key, we don't have different fucking rules for different fucking rolls. That drives me nuts. Too much to remember.
Thoughts, Pseudo?
Yeah, I think the opposed makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that we think about the difference between inanimate and agency. There's a difference, and it can be up to GM discretion. But I want to make sure there's a difference between someone attacking you, or you attacking someone, and you punching a punching bag. Like there's always the case where a player will want to hit another player, and then you get into a point where you now have players directly rolling against them without any GM interference. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to. I'm saying if this is system rule, there's just certain edge cases. I'm just trying to make sure we cover. And I like opposed rolls. I like that, and I think that as long as it's defined for if it's a an NPC or a character, they will roll dice like they would. If it's a inanimate thing, it's a bit more on fate as in difficulty of the task, but there's still a dice being rolled just by the GM to determine kind of the outcome. But I want to make sure there's an approach where I make sure that no matter, it still handles that difference between player hitting NPC, player hitting wall, player hitting another player.
Yeah, and I think with the opposed rolls, you have your degree of success spelled out for you, which is nice.
Yeah, I kind of like that you're probably going to succeed, but there's still a chance. You throw that punch at that guy, you never know. But he probably won't get you again.
Do we want to have some sort of advantage system? Because we all, as far as I know, are big fans of the advantage system. That will say, you sneak attack somebody. You get bonus dice, maybe not twice as many dice.
No. I proposed it earlier, and I say we go the Yahtzee method where you get to re-roll your failures.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
We could factor in the critical failure as just a dice you don't get to re-roll. So it
Yes.
doesn't mean you fail. It just means you just don't have a greatest chance as a super success.
I like it. I like it.
You can't re-roll a...
If you rolled a 1 on that die,
That's increasing your chances to get a crit fail too then, though.
if
If let's say you have...
re-roll non-1 failures.
Yeah, so let's say you have 2 skill, right? And an extra +2, so you're rolling 4 dice and you need 2 1s. You rolled 1 1 and 3 fails. You're going to roll the 3 fails again, and if any of them come up as 1, you crit fail. So the advantage works out
Yeah,
to be
I mean,
dangerous.
extra risk. You know, do you want to re-roll it or do you want to just keep it? Depending on like, it adds a thing if you want to go for a crit success. You know, do you take just the fail or do you take, you know, the chance of getting a crit fail for the chance of getting a success?
So then you're saying there's just times where when you have advantage, it's more advantageous for you to opt to not reroll?
Advantage shouldn't always be reroll. Advantage would just be you get more dice.
I don't understand how that would be
Yeah, because it's the
any worse.
The problem with
because
rerolling,
like crit fail is still rolled the number of ones equal to your skill.
Mm-hmm. You still have to roll 2 1s if you get to reroll that 1 on the advantage.
Yeah, and you still take the higher of the 2 because you've got the advantage.
No. You're not taking the higher
yeah.
of the 2. Not like an advantage. It's just you're re-rolling those dice, and when you
Yeah,
re-roll them, that's what you end
is
with.
it as a pure reroll? I don't like that at all.
No. That's the nice thing about advantage is you get that choice. Without that choice, there's not really much of a difference because there's the thing you got to think about is there's a big difference between rolling 2 1s and rolling 1 1 and 120 for their advantage system.
Yep.
You know, the chance of getting 2 1s is, you know, very unlikely.
Yeah,
the chances of
that's
getting
why
1
advantage
1
works well in that system.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen with a reroll because you would, you know, you don't know what you're going to get that second time. You don't have that first option still. You re-rolled it. You could have gotten an 18. You re-roll and you get a 1. That's why I was saying if you get a 1, there's no point to re-roll it because we're removing that faction of getting a 1 after anyways for your roll. But I think it's better just to have, you know, you roll a bunch and you just take the higher numbers or take the successes.
See, that's why my original one for the advantage, because the purpose of advantage is bumping it up, you know, giving you a better percentage. You know, you get to roll 2 d20s real quick and take the higher of the 2, better chance of success. If in an advantage situation, we just, you know, crit fail is crit fail. If you roll a number of 1s equal to your skill, then that's fine. There's no additional chance of crit fail. You'd keep your successes and you'd roll 1 more quick pass to try to get a couple more successes on that roll because you had an advantage on it. That's how I would implement the advantage system. It just gives you that chance to get an extra 1 or 2 successes.
As long as we're not re-rolling an existing dice, then it'd be advantage because then...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're not re-rolling your
you
successes.
You used the word re-roll, which confused us, I think.
Okay. No, you're re-rolling specific dice, not your whole turn.
You're adding more dice.
No.
You effectively are.
Kind of.
If
But it's not at the beginning that you're doing it.
If you roll a thing and you go to re-roll it, it is different than rolling 2 things at once. There is a very different case in that.
Just to make sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay, you roll your 5 dice. You get 2 successes, 3 failures. You had advantage. You pick up the 3 failures and roll those 3 dice again, keeping the 2 successes, and see what it ends up as. A chance to change the failures, basically.
So a failure is just anything lower than those 3?
Yeah. You take all your 1, 2, 3s and re-roll them to see if you can get more 4s, 5s, and 6s.
But then you have the chance of getting a crit failure.
But a significantly reduced chance. You're rolling less dice.
That's not how probability works.
You're rolling less dice. If I roll...
No, that doesn't matter. The point is, what I'm trying to say is when you roll it simultaneously, it doesn't matter that you got a 1 because you got anything higher than a 1 is the point of an advantage system. If you take that part away, if you just have a number and you're re-rolling it, you now have a chance to get something lower than you had before, which is not advantage. Advantage, the whole point of it is you have...
There's only a 1 or a 0 in this, though. You can't get something lower than you had before. It's either a pass or a fail.
Then what's a 1?
Yeah, there's a 1, 0, 1, or 2.
So like, but like with 1, 2, and 3, and the 1 was supposed to be something bad. So let's say you in that thing, are we talking crit failures? Or are we talking regular failures? Let's say you roll 3 2s and you re-roll, and then you get some 1s. Is my point is that when you do a re-roll, you can get less than what you had before. But the point of advantage is that you never have less than of the 2 higher dice. My thing is you could get a 3, re-roll it, and get a 2. Is my point if you roll
but a
at the
3
same
and a 2
time.
are the same thing in this, so that wouldn't.
As long as
matter.
it's the same with 1. As long as it's the same with 1, then it's fine.
It's more about the critical mass of ones. And if we got like 1 or 2 successes in
Right,
our
but
original roll, then it would
you
basically
still
be
get
impossible to get
punished.
that.
You still get punished if you have 1 rank in whatever skill it is, and you've got some incredible gear, so you're rolling 4 dice, but you have 2 failures on your roll, and you roll one of them as a 1, suddenly it becomes a critical failure. You have to keep the higher.
Okay, well, you could just call it a chance to get more successes. Yeah.
You have to keep the higher number.
I think like the point I'm trying to bring up is that it's not really advantage anymore. It's just a high risk, high reward, or just a risk reward system rather than.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, I guess it's not just a normal roll, and you just.
Yeah.
It's a chance to get more successes. It only counts if you get successes with those rolls. Basically, is what you're arguing for.
Yeah, that's why if you
I'm
roll
totally
at the same
fine
time,
with that.
Yeah, if you roll at the same time, then it seems like it's the same, but from overall perspective, it's not. Because if you roll like a 2 and then a 1, it's different than rolling a 2 1 at once because you just take the 2. Is kind of the point of it. It's when you take out the initial value and re-roll it, you're taking it away rather than cementing it as a thing. So if you want to roll additional dice on top of it, then that's fine, and you just you can
additional
re-roll it
dice actually makes more likely to get crit fails as well.
I was going to say, but you don't take the value is what I'm trying to say. An advantage. You get a 2, you re-roll it, you get a 1, you take the 2 is the thing, is what I'm trying to say. So we can still do it, but the point of it would be you couldn't get anything lower than what you had right now, which would just be kind of a bit strange. So if you had a 3, you could re-roll it, but you can't get anything lower than 3. But then it's kind of weird when that isn't taken away from there because now, there's nothing... if you do it fast enough or people aren't paying attention, it's like, well, what'd you have? It's like, I didn't have a 1, I had a 2. And I rolled a 1 again, so it's actually just a 2. There's just a bunch of stuff in there, or if you just want to re-roll a dice on top of it, we can. Or if we want to just roll more at once, then you just negate, your lowers, get them out of there, don't worry about it, or something. I'm just saying, like a re-roll is different from having 2 at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I was never talking about at the same time. Yeah, the other die was discarded when it's re-rolled. But
no, that's a punishing system. That's not a reward. That's not an advantage.
At that point, it would just be, and I understand what you're saying. So, I think I'm thinking similar, but wording is coming out wrong. Where a 1 wouldn't be more for the crit fail. It would just be that many chances to get an extra success. Basically. You failed on this many dice, you get to roll that many dice and see if you get any successes that will be added in. You're not rolling them as dice, you're just rolling to see if you get more successes. Because I see it playing out the same as Yahtzee. You roll, everybody looks at them, you grab everything 3 or lower and roll it again to see if you get any more successes. And they're added in.
We're making Yahtzee.
You still can't get more successes than would ever be possible with the dice because you're only taking the failures. But it's a chance to get closer to perfect successes. Also might help you crit succeed because you get more 6s. And there is that extra excitement with rolling them and seeing those new dice come up.
I like the idea of re-rolling your failures and taking highest.
Okay. Yeah.
As advantage.
Yeah. Taking highest throws me off because I only think of it as a pass-fail system, and that's kind of what was confusing me.
Well, in this case, highest is a pass.
Yeah. I'm with this. I like this. And hey, Rubido, I think I said that, but yes. Okay.
So we should probably write that down after all that discussion so we don't forget it.
Success on die. I have that die target. That was advantage. Roll failures to attempt to get. Roll failures and keep any new successes. Yeah? And when you have advantage,
I think
you
just re-roll failures keep highest is the clearest way to write that. Because it doesn't matter if you rolled a 2 and then a 3. That's still a failure, but you got a higher number. So you failed less hard.
You still failed hard.
Still failed, but you failed less hard.
The result is the same, but you feel better about it.
And then for disadvantage, reroll successes keep lowest. Question mark?
No, disadvantage gives advantage to the opposed roll.
Yeah, that's a less cumbersome way to do that.
Then it's all one quick, easy roll. I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's a really good start.
I think if we go to simultaneous rolls on opposed rolls
Well, we already can. It doesn't
and
change
use no, I'm just going off of what we have written down at the bottom of the document there because we do specifically spell out in ordering.
anything.
If we go to simultaneous rolls and do number of successes and then mitigation and degree of success numbers.
It basically is simultaneous here. I'm just putting them on different lines, but if you look, they're both rolled before any successes are added or anything's counted.
Yeah, but the implication is that it's separate actions because they're on separate lines.
Okay.
I think this will work. I would want to do a couple of just like playtest actions.
Yes. We can do it in our heads fairly easily, what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Maybe you do the programming example. Character trying to write some code.
Sure. So let's say, I'm trying to write some code as a rank 3 coder.
Okay.
So that means I have 4 die to succeed. I have some IDE that doesn't give me any bonuses.
Okay. Base, no modified roll.
No modified roll, just 4 die.
Yep.
I roll my 4 die. I succeed with a 4 and a 5, and I fail with a 3 and a 2.
Mm-hmm.
So in that turn, I would get 9 points worth of code written.
But there's an opposed roll. So how difficult?
If I pass the opposed roll.
Yeah. How difficult is the task that you're trying to write?
I'm trying to write something pretty basic, just logging some stuff.
Okay, so like a 1.
A 1, maybe a 2.
Okay. Let's call it a 1 to try to test the extreme. I guess it's not a 0, but it's a 1. It's got some skill to it, but you're still interacting, but it's 0 would be like, hello world and training stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a 1, which means it gets 2 dice. And it rolls a 2 and a 5.
A 2 and a 5. So it's got 1 failure, 1 success.
Yeah. So we just count the success. We don't worry about a failure and whatever.
Yeah.
The failure doesn't register and the success adds a success.
So it has 5 points of success mitigation. And I have 9 points.
Why 5 points?
Because it rolled a 5.
See, this is I'm just thinking it as a 1 or a 0, pass or a fail. So it's got plus
Right.
one,
So you're
one
not-
pass.
You're not understanding then. The 5 is both counting as a success and how much success you have.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a coin flip. There needs to be some reason for the numbers, because otherwise it would just be 50% coin flips.
Well, other than the 6s and 1s counting for crits and fails.
Right. But the meat of the system is going to happen between 2 and 5. But because the task has 5 points of success mitigation, I would get 4 points of work done. Because I rolled a 4 and a 5.
Well, then why ignore the value of the 2 and the 3?
Because
There's no point in even having a target at that point if you're just counting their values. We just roll the dice and add them up.
That's what I was thinking with the, wait, what if we just don't care about successes and it's just values? What if we, remove the concept of a success and a fail and just go on crit fail and crit success?
It starts getting to be a lot of multi-column addition and subtraction.
Which is why we kept the success and fail.
Well, either way, it's going to be
keeping
a
the
lot of
math
multi-column.
smaller.
It's not going to be that much smaller still. You get a few successes on, like a 5-point roll, you're still going to be at like 12, 14.
As opposed to like 50. Like,
Wouldn't be. That would be a lot. But it's still going to be quite a bit of math.
like there's going to be some math somewhere. But because we're combining both degree of success and whether or not you succeed into a single roll, then it's less things that players have to do to move the turn along, right?
I'd almost rather move to a bunch of coin flips at that point.
I wouldn't. Because like this spells out your degree of success. It spells out your crits, and like your crit success, you rolled a bunch of 6s. So you automatically have a bottom end of 18 success points. Like you're automatically going to be very successful at it.
So we just take out the crit success system and the crit fail system as well?
No, I think that's fine.
So
But,
what
like,
happens to this value when you crit success?
in a task of like large scope, like if I need to write a whole program and it's going to take me 2 days, I would get 4 hit points of success dealt to completing that program, which has, we said, rank 2, probably 10-ish hit points on it.
Why does rank 2 have crit success was supposed to be just you succeed at your roll for a while there.
You succeed harder.
But what about in a like why did you have that value of addition to it?
Just because I'm trying to relate it back to combat, honestly. If it's a task that it's just like, yep, you take this long to do it and you succeed, then the degree of success doesn't matter if it's just a skill check. But if it's combat or something that's going to take a long time, something that's going to need multiple rolls, then you need to have something to gauge your degree of success against.
It's just getting to, it needs to be simpler. I'm not against the idea, but it needs to be simpler. It's getting too convoluted.
All right, what you got?
I don't know yet. I just know that this is too much. Like we're already like it's getting into, well, if we're rolling for this, but if we're rolling for that, and it's inelegant.
Suggestions, please.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. If you want to start adding in the numbers like that, though, it's things got to change.
But it without like degrees of success spelled out on dice, there's no point in having dice.
Well, degrees of success were spelled out just by having +1 or zeros with successes or fails.
No, it might as well be a coin flip.
Good with a coin flip.
I'm not. That's stupid.
You can't crit succeed or fail with a coin flip. You know,
I think
the dice are still
we're
used.
running into that problem where a d6 is quite restrictive in its values, and then multiple of them is still constrained, versus kind of why a lot of things move to a d20, was that you have this one die to roll, many possible outcomes, and you don't have to worry about, like you can still roll a 2 or 3, but with, 4 d6s you can't, which is fine, but you're still rolling a lot of stuff, which means, each dice still has to matter because you're rolling them, but now, that adds a lot of effort versus just rolling one thing and being like, oh, this number is 5 or this number is 10 and there's one number against it. If we want to keep it simple, we may want to just think about not having a lot of dice, keeping it smaller dice, just having them be more impactful, or just maybe having them be a bit more reserved, or just using larger dice then. Because like 1 to 6, like a 1 to 6 chance is like a 16% chance, which is, not too far away from a, we're getting, not it's going to be, it's pretty common. So it's like, if we want that, the way to negate that is by doing combinations and certain combinations, but then, they have to matter, and it can get a bit complicated quickly. And then the math when we're running with multiple d6s, like I said, when you have that baseband of, if you roll 2 d6s, most of the time you will get 7. How do we, account for that? Do we want 7 to be a baseline, and then someone who's better, rolls with 3, but, that extra dice, the chances of them rolling more than 7 is actually a lot more than what we think, because things, aren't always linear curves in regards to, when we start working with probabilities, a lot of entropy in there. It's going to be, way more. It just, I think.
Yeah, when you start adding the numbers up and adding in extra dice, it becomes massively more powerful. That's why I kind of think of it as a success or fail per die. One die isn't the most massive add in the world. It's significant.
A success and fail per die, then we're just back to the coin flip.
Well, no, because you're still using the top and bottom ends of the dice, which is, like you were saying, 15, 16% on top, 15, 16% on bottom. That is not a die or a coin flip.
Yeah, but then we want to build around the notion of crits, which then get hard to balance, because you're as likely to crit succeed as you are to crit fail.
Except not, because they're not quite the same thing.
Because then we have to do things like add more dice, which then complicates things, because we need reasons for more dice besides just making the failures less frequent.
I don't know what you mean. Everything changes with more dice. You have more to get successes with in your opposed rolls, which means you have better chances of successes against the opposed roller. And then the math against you becomes, 3 to 2 or 3 to 1 or 4 to 5, rather than adding everything up and doing quick math.
I'm saying when you have more dice, there's just more, like the combinations between them you have to keep in mind. Like I said, a 1 and a 6 is a 7. Is kind of what my point was.
Yeah, but you don't care about that. This was a fail and this was success. It doesn't matter what they added to, so that's all gone.
So then it doesn't matter. Then it's just a coin flip, besides the 16%. And then it's just a 1 and 6. And then it doesn't matter how much you do it, but then we add more dice. But now we're rolling all these dice, but then they're still acting as coin flips, except for this little bit of how many succeeds and how many crit fails did you get. But then we come to the point of when you're trying to crit fail, and it's anything more than 3, it's going to be very unlikely. So then it becomes kind of a weird mechanic of, you're just rolling dice and it's a coin flip. But now most of the time you'll just kind of crit succeed, but you'll kind of very rarely crit fail. And the balance for it's going to get kind of way out of whack.
Well, it's going to be opposed rolls all the time, so it's going to be successes versus successes, attempting to complete a skill.
So then it's coin flip versus coin flip, and you cancel them out.
Basically.
So then it's just, if you have higher skill, you get more coin flips, but then you still have your likeliness for failure is still pretty high based off that probability of a coin flip. You just get more chances at it. And for us, we think that means you'll succeed more, but that's not always the case when it actually goes into play.
Okay, but if you have more chances at a success than
that's
whatever
that's
you're
kind of
opposed against, right? It's because it's about the opposed roll system. It's not in a vacuum.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The point that the problem with it is when we rely on probability, we're relying on assumptions that probability is always going to work in the calculated favor when there's, that's not always the case. And you run into issues where, like I'm saying, rolling 3 1s is the same chance of rolling, 3 6s. And even though they can mean wildly different things, the probability is still there. And even though we can look at a chart and say, more often, if you roll one more die, you'll win more. It's not going to be too likely. Even though we think that's the case, if we rely on probability that much, it can have, pretty drastic results. That's why a lot of games, like I said, have that fail-safe where they influence a lot. Because then people get to the point where they have a 95% success rate, but they still feel like they're failing all the time because 95% isn't very much. A 1 in 6 isn't very much. Is kind of the point I'm getting at, is like, if we want it to really be influenced, you're going to have to start rolling so many more dice than the other person. And it's just going to start getting kind of crazy because we're rolling all these dice with all these numbers in between that don't really matter because the only numbers we care about is basically just getting a 1 or a 6.
Well, the success and fail, like just who rolls 4, 5s, and 6s is what we're looking at.
Right, but those numbers don't mean anything unless we're using them to determine degree of success.
Yeah, like my point is that you're just going for 6s, and then if you don't get a 6, it doesn't really, matter too much because that's what you're going for. And then you're just rolling more and more dice to get to those, and then it just gets kind of bloated in the sense of you just have all these numbers now, and if you didn't roll a single 6, then things get kind of weird because you're like, yeah, okay.
Why? Doesn't matter if you don't roll 6s, you can still succeed.
But then it's a coin flip. That's what we were
And
talking about.
How do you determine your
Now
degree? What did you do? How did you succeed? What did you accomplish in that success that isn't a critical success?
My point is just that you take out the 1 in 6, and these numbers are more in between now, and we're just coin flips. We're now coin flips with just a little bit, with a 60% thing of added stuff, which now drastically changes how everything's going to work. Is just kind of the problem we're kind of rolling ourselves into.
I don't see what about this problem counting the numbers on the dice and adding them together changes, other than adding more complexity to the extending situation.
That wasn't my point or my solution. My point and my solution was that a 1 to 6 system is very restrictive, and when we start adding a bunch of dice to it and then we start doing math, when we're just kind of relying on a pass-fail, we're just getting kind of, tangled up in this mess. And I think we need to figure out what our success range wanted to be, and then figuring out how we can modify D6s to match that, and then maybe not get so caught up on the 1 as a super fail and a 6 as a super fail, but trying to find a system in between that can kind of have a bit more of a threshold. My problem was always, we're still trying to do the crit fail, crit success that a D20 has, but now with a lot more, occurrence.
Yep.
And then even trying to add more dice to make it so that a 1, 3 1s is less common. We're now just adding a lot more into it to just reduce that factor, when maybe we should just not be worrying about those crits at all.
Okay. I'm open to this recommendation. Do you have any firm ideas, or?
Yeah, we just remove crits.
We
remove crits, and we can start basing it off how well you do in a roll based on the D6 system, and then we kind of the point of the problem is that a 1 to 6 is just such a high range. We have to heavily rely on the modifiers that we kept been saying but haven't talked about, and that's kind of the point of the modifiers, is that if you're rolling 2 dice, your average roll is 7. If someone's rolling 1 dice, they can never get 7. Is the problem that I'm trying to say we're going to happen. So that's why we need modifiers. But then that's the influence to get away from the entropy of dice. So now it's kind of just getting to the point of like, what do we want the dice to really be entropying into? Do we want to be restricted to 1 to 6, or do you want to maybe think of, some other methods that are in there? And, coin flips can be a part of them. Coin flips can put the things to there, but, we've got to be careful with the complexity that we're going to get to.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to go to multiple types of dice like old D&D was.
Yeah, because I think maybe we just don't worry about crits and super crits right now. We just try to worry about, how we want better people to have a better chance at success that isn't going to just rely on, a lot of chance. A little bit more, direct hand-holding, or depending on how different we want it to be. Is there going to be points where there's always a chance to always fail, or how much do we want it to be rolled against? Kind of is what I'm trying to say. If you're rolling 2 dice against 1, that can be fine, as long as, it makes sense to have that always be kind of a common thing where you'll, always succeed, but there's a chance that if you roll 2 2s and they roll, that's a 4, they need to get a 5 or a 6 to beat you. That's actually not too terrible. The chances of getting, less than 7 or less than 6 actually is kind of, not too terrible, but we have to make sure that the balance, at least for that, makes sense for the stuff we're doing. But the problem we run into is the scale. You add 1 more dice and all of a sudden that scaling kind of just goes out the window.
Yeah, I agree. If we're going to be adding the numbers, we need to, I'm not opposed to it, but everything that we've thought of has to be rethought and recalculated. Because, like you're saying, there's such a huge chance that the 2 dice could just roll 7 or higher, and it's like, hey, I win. There's no need for another roll.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing degrees of success.
Yeah.
Just saying.
If we wanted to, we could try doing a degrees of success, or try pulling in some inspiration from advantage, where you still only get, a limited number. Let's say it's always going to be 2 dice roll, but the higher skill player gets to roll more dice and keep the highest roll. So instead of rolling, one person rolls 2 dice, other person rolls 3 dice and keeps the highest 2. Still has a chance, still common to get, 2 2 5, 2 2 3, all that kind of stuff. But, they do have an advantage, and we can add it up that way if we want. And if we want to scale it, then we can remove a dice from the other player, or the other, the other thing, as kind of a more advantageous roll, rather than you getting another chance of, rolling a 1. You've now removed their chance of rolling a 6.
I'm liking where it's going right now, at least.
Yeah, my main thing was just like, with more dice rolls comes more chance for kind of failure. But if we keep a base like that, maybe even just 3 dice, if you're going to roll another dice, you can still roll a 1 or a 2. But if you have a system where it makes them have 1 less for the, if it's a, let's say, attacker, defender, they have 1 less dice roll, then they have, the same chances of rolling a 1 or a 6 when they roll. They just have less chances of getting more to get that 6. So they're less likely to succeed because you're better than them, but you don't have more chance to fail because you're better than them.
So I like the present, like using the numbers in order to represent varying degrees of success, but the offsetting dice is hugely unbalancing. So I really like Pseudo's idea, which actually takes from some different stat rolling strategies in D&D, where you can only keep the number of dice that, like basically the other person has, basically. So you roll more than them, which means you have far better chances of rolling higher than them, but your range is still the same. You can't just completely out dominate and power them. You've still got to roll well. You've just got so much higher chance.
Yeah.
Can you play out a turn, a theoretical turn, like a player opposed roll on that?
Sure. We can do one if we want, where someone is slightly better. Because like I said, once we actually start rolling dice, that's when the problem is we get to that probability where, if someone rolls a 6, someone rolls a 6. If they roll 2 6s, they roll 2 6s, and then there's nothing the other player can do. Depending on how we want to handle that. If that's a case, we want to, if we want to have that be a thing where if you both roll the highest, it negates and it fizzles, or if they both roll the highest, defender advantage or attacker advantage or initiator advantage or something. But we can try that. I'll pull up a dice roll thing, but we basically just need to have.
Do we want a tiebreaker? Is basically the question, or
so
do we want it to just be neutral?
It should just be initiator advantage.
Initiator advantage, even if it's a never before trained guy trying to punch a grandmaster.
Yep. And this is the problem with negating dice.
Well, then we just take a different solution to this problem, or this thing.
I think advantage, like I said, advantage doesn't go to who attacks first. It goes to
highest skill.
Yeah. I think the initiator was a bad thing. I meant to say advantage. So you can attempt to punch him, but you're going to be rolling with 1 dice against his 3, and you can get a 6, and if he gets 2 6s, then we can decide what happens there.
Even if he gets a 6 to match your 6, basically at that point, it becomes his advantage because he's got the higher skill.
Or if we want to have a baseline of like I said, 2 or 3 dice. If we do 2, then the baseline becomes that 7 is the most common number. And if you're rolling one number, you are going to fail pretty often because they're typically always going to get higher than 7, but will still, sometimes fall off. But if we add more dice to that number, that chance of getting 7 gets a lot higher. Is the kind of the point of that, is the whole thing of like your target to beat, like your target to get is basically just getting 7. It keeps it nice and easy. And then you just have more rolls to get up to that. You just need a couple more dice. Like I said, a 1 and a 6 does it. So if you add more to that, or if we have 2 and you want to roll a couple 3s, I'm getting myself all confused here, but my point was saying is that like, if you have 2 dice, rolling 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 and 1 are the fail cases, and then that's it. Or like you get 3 and 1, but like there's a certain amount of fail cases that can happen in there. But rolling, a 5 and a 1 will succeed, or 4 and a 2.
Is a fail case per se when we're doing opposed rolls. It's not like a single skill check target. We more need to know how to compare the 2 rolls together. Is really what we need to define. And I like the idea of counting the highest dice. You're going to know everyone's skill level. So if you're sitting there and playing and you're both rolling, right? I roll 4 dice for my skill. You roll 2 for yours. I may only get to keep my top 2 where you get to keep all your dice, and we compare them together. And if we tie, I rolled more dice, I win. The information is all super readily available and easily in there.
Right, but what if you're both rolling 2 dice and you both roll 2 5s, and now you've got
equal.
2 10s, but the person who rolled more dice wins? So what sort of winning happens? Like, what's the outcome of that?
A true fizzle? Like you see somebody...
If it's more dice and you roll the same, then you just had better skill, and it just relies back on you just had a higher number at the start if you both rolled the same at that point.
Yeah, but what's the outcome? Like, did they then do 10 success, or do they do 0 success because there was 10 success on the defense?
I think the success thing, I think we're still going back to more of, like I said, the binary system of you're trying to beat their roll. Do you beat their roll? Yes. Okay, well, how does this resolve? And I don't know if it matters that, the point of the adding the dice, I was saying the problem when you're trying to add them up is that, all of a sudden the 7 and the 8 and the 9 have a bit different meaning, when the reason why we're using the dice is for probability, not for power. We're trying to see how this will resolve, and you use different things to determine that resolution after. The point of this is just to have...
Right, but then how do we represent power?
As a resolution step. That's when we, depending on what the action is, when you jump over something, if it's a binary action, if succeed, fail, you succeed. If it's something where you're punching someone, okay, you succeed. Well, what were you punching them with? You know, is there a difference in that? Like, if you're punching them with brass knuckles, is that different from punching with bare fists? Is it different from, punching them in the jaw, bare, punching them in the football helmet? Like,
The
I think
force
there's
of
resolution things
impact
after.
comes from
I think-
the weapon itself that you're using. I agree.
I don't like that.
So no matter what gun you're shooting, it should all do the same damage, be it a pistol or a sniper rifle. It's all about the successes.
Yeah, because a better weapon adds more success or more advantage.
Just a chance for it. That means there's a chance that a sniper rifle hitting somebody could do less damage than a pistol.
Except that you've got more dice, and if you're using the dice to determine degree of success, then
You
you're
could still
going
roll
to do
all
more
ones
damage.
on the sniper rifle
I
on
think
the
well,
damage.
the difference is that
Except that it's not 2 rolls; it's 1 roll. So your successes are what you add up to deal your or to have your degree of success. Like
I think at that point it just gets weird because you're just restricted, like I said, with a D6. You have someone who will punch you, and you have the best item in the game, but you're now still restricted to a D6.
Yeah,
How much
have-
better can it get, right? How much better degree of success can you get? You don't have that. That's what needs to happen. It happening versus the resolution needs to be separated unless we want a super complicated dice system where all of a sudden you're rolling with 200 dice because you need to have, a nuclear blast versus the dude trying to just punch, the fucking thing falling down on him. It's
I am with Pseudo on this, where it needs to be 2 different rolls, success or fail, and then
then we should
the
just use
effect
a
of
D20.
it. But the D20 brings in the constant 5% crit, constant
Well,
5%.
We should just use a
crit.
D20.
the problem with the D. I mean, we could use D20 with advantage, but I think you're just kind of giving up on the idea because we're getting a bit frustrated and we're over time. But the point of it was just it's 2 separate steps. I don't know if that was really that big of a deal. And if we want to use a D20 after, we can. But my point is just the D6 is just restrictive. If we want to roll with the D6, then we can, have to do it in a certain way where we need to balance it. But if we want to just use a bunch of high rolled dice, then we can just do that. We can use, if you want to have a sniper versus pistol, the pistol can be a D3, and the sniper can be, a three D20s. But, it's just complicated at that point. I think the thing we wanted to do was keep it simple, where you just, what's the likelihood of resolution due to advantages in skill?
Yeah.
Once it resolves, okay, well, what's the modifiers now? What's the resolution act? And I think I was
Even-
trying to keep up a system between punching someone and jumping over someone. Do you have a degree of success, jumping over a gap? And it's like, well, you could, but, at the end of the day, does it really, matter? Do we need to make it that complicated? Can you just succeed and then, depending on what the action was, determine what that success looks like after?
That's
And
where I
don't-
was.
I
with it.
don't think we need to have a prescriptive thing for that. Like, that's if it's a simple task. Sure, you succeeded on more success dice than the opposing roll. So yeah, you did it. But in something complicated like combat, you need to have a degree of success. You can't just go, yes, you killed him.
Well, you're not
and-
trying to kill him. You're trying to do something very specific.
You're trying to do your action. Does your
Yeah.
action resolve?
You don't say, I kill him, and then roll for it. That's not the turn of the play.
Okay, so my example was combat. I have a baseball bat.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me 1 additional die.
No.
The thing that I'm attacking,
No, that's
Only-
not the system we're talking about.
Only if you're good with that bat would you get an additional die.
We're not talking about, we're still thinking of like a previous thing is what we're talking about. I think that's where the confusion is. It comes from, we're performing a melee combat action. If we want to have, modifiers in there, we can do that. But I think at that point, like you said, it's just going to get super complicated. Like, it's a baseball bat. Like, do we want to have, you can succeed with it. And I don't know if we really need to have you succeeded because you hit him in the head. I think it's just, hitting him in the head. If we want to go that way and have direction, it's just harder to do than just smacking him in the chest.
right, that wasn't at all where I was going with that.
But the
Okay, so I'll let you finish. I'll let you give
Yeah.
your example. My apologies.
So the example that I was trying to get through there was, if, say, character 1 has the same level of skill as character 2 in melee combat. Character 1 has a weapon that gives them the advantage of having an additional die. We do the same resolution that we were talking about before, number of successes, add up the values of those successes to determine how much success it is. Then having a weapon gives a significant advantage, as it should. And like, if neither of them had a weapon, then player 1 attacks player 2. The opposed rolls, if player 1 hits player 2 and they don't have quite enough mitigation value, they still deal damage because player 2 is getting hit. They still have to block that. Like, I don't know why we've moved away from... Yes, the D6 is restrictive. Yes, we do need to be careful with how we modify the number of D6s and, maybe add pluses to values of the D6s. But if we're not going to go with the D6 system, if we're not going to use those D6s, then you might as well D20 for success and then have a separated damage roll, and then you're just using D20.
I think you missed the point of having the multiple D6s for the point of advantage rather than a D20. Because you're not both rolling D20.
Sure.
Someone's rolling a D12.
Then why would you?
What do you mean?
Like, advantage works perfectly fine on a D20.
I'm not talking about the advantage. Like, I mean, if we want to support that many numbers and have that be there, then I say we can. I'm not against D20. I mean, it can be D6, D3, it can be coin flip. My point was just, we use that as a resolution thing. My problem with the thing we say, the baseball bat adds the dice, then we have equipment that is, more than skill. 'Cause I thought we were doing skill-based, and equipment's just something you happen to have when you resolve your skill check. Because you could have, a Nerf bat, you could have a wooden bat, a metal bat, a spiked bat, Is that going to change? Does that add more dice in that case? Or do we want to have that separate where you resolve because you're good at swinging bats? Doesn't matter what bat you have, but if you swing a Nerf bat, you're only going to do so much damage. But if you swing a spiked bat, you get to do more damage that's determined after. It can just be even a flat value. It doesn't have to be a dice roll.
Sure, but that's talking about the equipment system.
But you are including the equipment system when you start saying he's holding a weapon, so he gains dice. Do all weapons gain the same amount of dice?
Some advantage. Like, think more abstractly. Maybe it was a shitty example, but like, you have outside influence that can give you additional dice.
Well, the difference for that was not equipment, but skill. If they're the same skill, then it should be the same dice roll. But if it's additional skill in the action they're doing,
there are things that can modify the skill, but it's not going to modify the damage. It's just going to make them more likely to hit. Not necessarily do more damage with the hit.
And we could keep something simple where there's, skill with certain things, but there's kind of just evasion for more on the defense. And then after it resolves, armor negates damage.
Yeah, evasion is something I see adding more dice to that roll, yeah. Aiming assisters would modify your dice for that roll.
I'm not sure if I don't know the background or anything. Like, I came in late and I don't know what's been kind of predisposed, but I'm just trying to think of is just, trying to keep, skill tied to resolve. But if we want equipment based stuff where equipment has stats and stuff like that, then we can do a different approach. But just from what I thought we were doing was skill based actions, which could resolve, and it's your skill versus the thing's skill, or your skill versus a skill check, because there's difficulty in what you're attempting to do, and that's determined, and then you resolve, and then in the resolution step a separate thing is determined depending on the action you're doing, whether it's striking someone or jumping.
Right. But then you still need to talk about degree of success, and now you're back up to 2 roles, which negates our whole initial purpose that we laid out of wanting there to be a streamlined experience.
Well,
What's
two
this-
roles
no.
isn't bad for a streamlined experience as long as all the math
Well, then we're
involved
not
in it
getting
is simple.
anything. We're not getting anything new from D20. Like there's nothing new here. We might as well just use D20. Use the library.
It's dice, man. Like, you know what you want. It's dice. it's an RNG dice system.
Yeah, we've mitigated the ability for crit fail at higher skills. We've increased the chance for crit fail at lower skills. We've played with those numbers already in the previous ideas. That's why we went to D6. Now we're making the D6 work smoothly and in ways that are familiar.
The reason why we weren't using just D6 was just the range of 1 to 20 is quite a bit. But if we want to have a bit more, like I said, if we want to use D6, then we have to build into the restriction of it. We can't try to fight the restriction of it. Was kind of the point. But if we want to just, use a D20, we should do that. Like, I don't know what the problem here is. Like, I don't know.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like if we're seeing these problems,
I don't know what the problem.
I don't
can you
see a
explain-
problem.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is so far. Like we base off like either 3d6 or 2d6. It's a skill check that determines whether you have more die or 2 die, but there's still a baseline number of d6 that you're keeping, similar to the advantage system, and that's where the skill check checks. If it's 2, if it's baseline of 2, you're always trying to basically kind of compete for that 7 or higher. If you have more advantage, or if you want to remove a dice roll, then that person can only roll a 6. Your chances of rolling 7, depending on how many more dice you have, goes up. But you can still roll less than, a 7 or a 6 was kind of the system we were going here. Rather than just having D20s battle it out with a huge system of range numbers, we have a system where there's, a more restricted, probability band that we can build around of.
And
how do you determine degree of success then?
we're getting there. We'll get there.
I
We
don't
just
think
need
we
to
need degree of
determine yes
success.
or no right now.
I think
There needs to be a degree of success. Not everything is a flat yes, no, you did the thing.
but that's not new. If we want something new, let's not do degree of success. Let's do resolution and build something new on top of that. Let's not do AC 15.
let's see where it
UCC.
goes.
New does not mean good.
No.
But
no.
that's not why we try to do
But
things.
that's not. Well, that's also not why we're just going to go with the new automatically. New might mean good, so let's work on it.
Yeah,
That's
like,
kind of why we're
if-
doing this.
If we don't want new, then use the library, like you said.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
But the whole point is to make something. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's never like what was the point? The point wasn't to make the next best thing. It was to try something new and see how it goes.
Yeah. Design challenge.
Yeah, it's something new. If it's not good, then whatever. But we can try something new.
We iterate, we refine until we like it, and we see what we've come up with. We'll come up with something good. With the three of us all working on it at the same time like this, it will be good by the end. Trust me. Just agree with what you agree with, disagree with what you disagree with. We'll go until we all agree, and it'll be wonderful.
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset if it's even not good. It's just that's the point of design. Like you're trying to do new things. It's the part of the creative thing. You're supposed to try to break the mold a little bit, and most of the time you fail. But sometimes it can be good, and sometimes it's just the experience, and sometimes it's just unique. There's a lot of stuff out there, like we say, you change 10%, but sometimes you can change a lot more than 10%, and it fails a lot. But sometimes it can still be an interesting endeavor.
So think of this as an exercise to see how well we can make D6 fit this new system. That's the design scope.
I think it may have just been a bit too open. I think when stuff like this, it helps when you have restrictions in place, because then it can kind of funnel the kind of designing and creative process. Otherwise, it's just too open, and there's just too many things that can kind of go on and go there. But if there's restrictions in place, like a certain like a system we have to use, or a certain thing, or a certain action, or a certain type of framework that we build upon, then it allows us to play a bit more in creativity. But I think at this point we're kind of just a bit broad, and we're trying to just build the next supercar out of just out of the
Legos.
ground.
Out of D6s.
Well,
out of the ground.
Let's take it
when-
as a design challenge of trying to streamline the the D6 system that Shadowrun started. Because I like the scaling and I like the way the D6 curve when we start using more dice.
Yeah, because like I agree, like D20 is great, and I honestly think the D&D system what they have with 5e is close to perfect, and I wouldn't change any of that. But if we want to add a restriction to, we want something maybe a bit more accessible to people who just have D6s, because they're a lot more common than D20s. Then we can use that as a design challenge and use that as a restriction to kind of fuel a bit more of what we want. But if we're going to just roll into this saying, let's make a pen and paper system as 3 amateur game designers versus $1 million company with the best in the business, yeah, we're going to suck and we should just use their system. But I think we need to add some restrictions. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be D6, but I think before we approach this, we need to add some restrictions to kind of fuel that creativity or find a problem that we want to actually solve.
Like I said, I like the distribution the D6 gives us, and it's the most common die. Like you're saying, everyone has them. No one needs to go out and buy special dice for it. And I honestly kind of hate the I rolled a 1, I failed on this task that I'm a master at. That's always pissed me off. Especially with some GMs being like, okay, you failed catastrophically. Aw. Or, train your whole life with the sword and drop the sword 3 times in one fight.
That has totally been my experience.
Yeah. And that's I do want to see that less. That's what we first achieved with the more D6 as you go up in skill. That's why we've gone away from the D20 originally. So why not use D20? That original reason. That's what we're trying to work around. That's kind of what I see it. And then it's just, can we do it? Forces a death saving throw on nat 1s. There's only a critical failure if both get a nat 1 and fail that save. And your save goes up with skill, so it kind of works. Literally every pen and paper game you manage to break your bowstring at least twice a campaign. Yeah. Exactly. Stuff like that. I like the that other idea, but that's a lot of extra complexity that just that GM has come up with in order to try to fix that system. So it just goes to show that other GMs see a need to resolve something there as well. We're not the only ones that have seen this issue, for sure. And that's his house rule of fixing it. I think we can come up with something elegant. That's my thing. I'm not opposed to other ideas, as long as it's elegant at the end. Multiple rolls can be elegant. It can be. As long as it's roll, look at it, not a lot of math. We just kind of do a visual comparison and we do another roll to do the completion. Elegance isn't low rolls per se. It's just not a lot of complexity in the rolls. I'm not having to add lots of numbers to them. I'm not having to do lots of math in my head. You follow what I'm saying? I see your gears grinding a little bit there.
Sure. But like there's gonna be math.
Yeah, there is. Absolutely.
You can't not have math.
No, you can. Absolutely not have. You absolutely do need to have some math in there. Yes. I 100% agree with you. Magic the Gathering level math is what I try to stick to. Magic the Gathering, if it can work in Magic the Gathering, it can work in other places, is kind of how I see it. Because those cards are played very quickly, on the spot, and all the math is just in your head. It's at most, 5 minus 3, and, 8 minus 2, and things like that. That's typically what you tend to end up seeing. And it's all about how we use the dice from there. Anyway. We've gone long, and I totally forgot.
Almost an hour long.
I fucking forgot to order dinner. We were so into this. Fuck. Oh well. I've got to figure that out. Next week, do I even have games done? I don't even think I have games done. We got Fury to talk about. That's it. So we may do more of this next week, and just argue for another 2 hours.
Oh boy.
Though
Systems design.
Honestly, the amount of arguing we did every once in a while, we'd come to an agreement, and I really liked whatever came out of whenever we stopped arguing and brought our heads together on a point. We found a middle ground that worked well, and I don't think any of us would have come up with by ourselves on each point. I think it was pretty productive.
The core that we came up with has a lot of meat on it.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. I think I'm actually looking forward to playing it. So we'll flesh out some more. Let's just call this the skill succeed binary decision, and we'll decide how we want to. Next stream, we'll be deciding if and how we want to deal with amounts of completion of a task. We'll look at some longer tasks and theorize a little bit on it. From there, we can go into skill typing and a little bit more combat mechanic. At which point
it's going to be 2 hours on degrees of success and how to determine success.
I know. I'm
hardest problem.
I'm just planning out the path of how this is going to grow from there. That leads into like combat, and then from combat it leads into what a character looks like. Those are kind of got to be at the same time, and then the character will have sort of a skill system and an equipment figured out and stats, and we'll get the basics of that, at which point we're almost ready to do a little bit of like combat playtesting and stuff like that. Maybe like another 2 years.
Ambitious.
So thanks for hanging out, Kuro, Dank, Zelo, Spent, Punk. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We honestly did, despite it looked like we were just arguing with each other. It was actually quite an invigorating little brain session for me. I rather enjoyed it. I hope you guys did. Rage and Pseudo.
Oh yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get the creative juices flowing.
Excellent. So I'm going to go eat food, and you guys are probably going to go eat food, and then we're probably going to play Valheim and get more creative juices flowing.
You need to build walls.
We need defenses!
So many times.
Help, defenses!
Fine.
And I'm taking some of the iron and putting a stone cutter at my house and starting to upgrade my house to stone and everything. That's the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, I just built one over at my place. I got to put stone floors in. I want to have at very least like some stone around the fireplace. It's going to be so pretty.
Yeah,
very nice.
And on the outside, I have to do all sorts of stone walkway because my house runs right into the lower part of the base. I'm gonna make that all nice and fit it well. Yeah, Pseudo's house got taken out by a troll, and then the ground was reclaimed by the government. Yeah, you got gentrified. You poor guy.
Go on a boat ride, find a merchant, come back. Everything's changed.
Your whole house is gone.
What happened to my neighborhood? You don't live here anymore. Okay. I'm going to build a little farmhouse and go retire. Just be grumpy. Tell railings to get off my lawn.
I really like problem solving, so this was awesome for you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kuro. This is literally why I started streaming, and Rage and Pseudo started the day I started helping me. They've been doing this with me since day one. We love this shit. We do this all the time. I hope you join us soon. Until the next time I get to see you, which I hope won't be too long, I'm Deus.
I'm Rage.
And I'm Pseudo.
May all your shots be headshots.